All right, welcome to the 16th podcast for North Georgia Advocate. We're here with Mark Faul today. He's a candidate for District 1 for the Hall County Commission, running against Kathy Cooper, Mark Turner, and uh, Corey Anderson. Vero, my normal co-host, he'll be here shortly. He had some things to tie up last minute this morning. But Mark, welcome to the podcast, and we're glad to have you. Just introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your personal background, how you came to Hall County, and how you got involved in local politics, and how you decided to run for the county commission.
Sure. Well, thank you for interviewing me and letting me be a part of this process. I'm really grateful for that. Uh, I first came to Georgia in 1996. I had a PhD and a master's degree, and I applied at the Centers for Disease Control. And lo and behold, they picked me up. They hired me, and I said, okay, this is South. I've always wanted to live in the South. I grew up in the Midwest, Missouri area, good piece west of St. Louis, and it was a different area of the country to explore. There's a lot of beauty down here. There's a lot of different way of thinking down here that took some time to adjust to. But I think politics are even different down here than in the Midwest. But I came down here in 1996. I've been in Georgia about half my life. I first settled in Gwinnett County, and I saw the growth out there, the rapid growth, how cow pastures turned into townhomes, and I decided I was not interested in politics at the time at all. I grew up on a farm in outside of St. Louis and St. Charles, and I learned how to drive a tractor long before I drove a car. Um, 12 years old when we were driving tractors, baling hay, dealing with corn, and all kinds of stuff. And always liked the wide open spaces and the farm life. But the different employment took me a different route at that point in my life. I like I said, I worked for the CDC, began in 1996, and did a lot of analysis and a lot of work for the CDC, as a heavily published scientist. Before that, I'll say a little bit more. When I lived in Missouri, I was a civilian administrator for the Department of Army. To be clear, I was not a veteran in any way. I was a federal employee that made personnel decisions and mostly in the area of employee management and discipline, terminations, all kinds of legal stuff with employees, congressional activities, terminations. Some of those can get pretty hairy. So I had a lot of personnel experience and some contract work in those days, and applied for the CDC in '96. Got the job, came down here, got indoctrinated or not indoctrinated. I adjusted to the CDC environment. It was a good bit different way, lots of different ways of doing things. But I did pick up one thing at the CDC that I think the federal government does better than both state and county governments, and that is ethics. There was an awful lot of controls and uh, controls over ethical decisions. For example, if you're a contract administrator over a certain dollar amount, I can't remember the dollar amount, there was no way you could have another job.
Right.
It was not allowed. It was not allowed unless you went to management and you would try to convince them that my job didn't have anything to do with my core job, which was providing public service. An example is we used to board horses out here in Flowery Branch area, and I actually went to the federal government and said, well, yeah, I know I do this. I do science work, and I I deal with some grants and contracts, but here I have this horse boarding operation that had nothing to do with my core work, and they examined it and said no problem. But it's standard practice to do that in the federal government. And the South has the there's nothing like that in local or I don't know. I can't speak to state exactly, but it was a shock to me when I came here and we have people doing real estate work side by side on their commissioner job. And I said, well, it's obviously a conflict of interest. There's no way to control it. Nobody looks at it. There's no reporting. There's no checks and balances on anything. And that was a bit of a shock. But I'm sorry to get into that.
No, that's fine.
So soon. But I think there's strength in somebody coming from a different area and asking the significant and serious questions of why are we doing it like this when this promotes this negative, this erodes public trust. Really, we're public servants. All this is about is the opportunity to serve the public. And after everything I've seen, I think I'd be a good candidate. But back to what I did for the CDC. I was involved in, I think, about 95 published studies, and for a scientist, a measurement of performance is how many citations you get. And I've had approximately 15,000 citations to the work that I did. Why does it matter? It's because it's impactful, and most scientists never achieve that level of citation. And part of it was because I worked at the CDC, but other parts of it was some of the work that I did documented saving lives if we do it this way versus that way, in the area of traumatic brain injury, transport decisions, EMS going to this hospital versus that hospital, crowding the system and trauma systems. And then also did a lot of work in the area of drug overdose and Narcan and naloxone, and try to figure out how to handle some of the drug overdose deaths that were creeping into society and
Right.
major impact. So after that, I retired in 2021 from the Centers for Disease Control, and I decided to do farming. Like I said, I had a long history of farming or working in wide open spaces in Missouri, and I started a vineyard and a winery here in Missouri. And it's been challenging. Grapes don't really want to grow here in this type of soil. There's been a lot of challenges. There's a lot of deer down here, but it's an opportunity to learn. And I have to say that's probably one of the most important things that motivate me in life is a lifelong learner. We never stop learning. We never say we know everything. I was never the smartest person in the room. I was one of the best listeners though. So it's a truly unique opportunity. I know you asked the question also too, how did I get started in politics? I almost ran in the last term in 2022, and with the winery, all the work that had to be done at that time point, establishing a vineyard, doing a lot of learning at that time about how do you do grapes, how do you do this, how do you do that, and permits through Hall County, and I had to get commercial permits here and construction permits several times. So I gained a lot of experience from zoning issues, and permit acquisition. And this is wrong. There's just so many things I was hit with. It just didn't make sense. Lots of barriers, lots of no-win scenarios. For example, this is 20 acres here, and one of the examples they said was you got to fence in all your 20 acres. Well, that would be about $500,000.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Why would you do that? This is agricultural space. And it's because they pulled out the commercial rules because it was a commercial building, and I could never get anybody to understand that these are two different animals. And things like they wanted me to plant trees in front of the vineyard. That's not why people come to a winery. It's just all the common sense stuff. And
Right.
something's deeply wrong here. And so there's some of the seeds were sown of, I would say, politics or government inefficiency. And then I know you asked a lot of questions. I'm trying to answer all of them.
But no, just what this is your time. Just
Yeah. So after the winery was established, there was a lot of concern with some of the developments with the current incumbent. She was the real estate agent on quite a few of them, and then she was also getting them approved through Hall County. And I remember the alpaca farm
right.
that was a good bit of property. I don't remember the exact acreage, but it was large. And I think the citizens came out, and there were over 1,000 people that signed up against it. Um, there was so much vocal resistance to the alpaca farm conversion into high density houses. And if we peel back the layers, guess who's behind it? It's Kathy Cooper. There's Oak Grove, same thing. Oak Grove subdivision. Um, yeah, it's like, okay, there's a trend here. There's a trend here, and I just never really understood how a person can be working in real estate and then turn around and make decisions in real estate that affect the community. I still struggle with that. How anybody can think that's appropriate.
Right.
And I to this day, I don't. When I tell people that, they're like, yeah, well, that's wrong. That's a conflict of interest. But she wins, and I I think part of it was there wasn't. This is in some ways a thankless job. Let's be honest. The
Oh, it
person,
is.
whoever makes the decisions, you're going to be upsetting another subset of people. Um, it's and so maybe there was some resistance by the public to get involved. And of course, people are generally busy raising their families, doing good things in their neighborhoods, working, and the politics stuff, that's for somebody else, right? That's for somebody else. And so I saw all these problems develop, and I said, you know what? I got to step in. I have 33 years of public service. I have a really proven record of strong public service. And it would be great if the community would give me an opportunity to apply some of these experiences and help our community grow. We're never going to stop growth. It's not going to happen. I don't think that's fair to the property owners, but we don't turn cow pastures into townhomes either.
No.
It affects the neighbors, and it affects the neighbors disproportionately because those townhomes and some high density housing is all touching agricultural type properties or that type of zoning where there's some expensive properties. There's some peop people in just middle class subdivisions, but it's so out of whack. And I was affected by this directly. The winery was impacted by Kathy Cooper uh, subdivision creation through an assemblage, through all the people that she knew and contacts, and um, we went through a long fight in front of the council, and the planning commission said no twice, and then the whole county recommended against it, and then, you know, the second time the application was submitted, it was approved by the Board of Commissioners, and Kathy Cooper recused herself from the vote. And we have damage from that. We have an erosion of public trust from the other subdivisions around here. It's just pretty clear. I mean, the public doesn't want it. In this case, um, there's been a legal case filed, and it shows through the deposition process that properties that are adjacent to this 114 acre development have a 40% loss in property value. I saw this, and we were fighting this through the system, and putting letters in. I presented in front of the commissioners probably 14 times, give or take, with the system. And at the end, it was clear they weren't listening. The votes were all all set.
Yeah, you're not changing their mind.
And okay, this is wrong, and we've got to fight it a different way. This was the way to fight it, and I know I've kind of drifted a little bit.
No, that's fine.
You asked a lot of questions. I'm happy to expand on anything you would like, but basically that's why I find myself in this position today. I have no side agenda. I have no business agenda at all. I know that's an issue with the candidates. I do not think that anyone who's involved in development or real estate should be making decisions, governmental decisions about um, zoning and real estate changes. Corey Anderson had asked for my support, I think back in January, and I said, "Well, I heard you're a real estate agent, right?" And he says, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "Well, I can't support you. I just the two jobs are absolutely incompatible." And so that was another clue that I need to get in this race.
Right. Well, at least Corey has put his into a holding company, and he's running his wife's dentist company. So he's tried to do what's the right thing, and get away from the real estate as much as he can. But I get your point. I'm 100% in agreement that they shouldn't be on the commission, or they shouldn't be developing the UDC code, the unified code, or anything, because it's a self-serving. They're going to do it self-servingly for the most part. And that's what we've seen in Hall County a lot. And, and it just gets frustrating that the commission, they demand your respect, but they don't respect the citizens. They don't listen to what they say. And we've got to change that. And you look back at the meetings back when Steve Gailey was on up until 2010, and you go to the commission meetings, they would debate things out in public, and you'd get their thoughts and their thought process. You go to the meetings now, there's no discussion about anything.
I've noticed that.
It's just procedural all the way down the line. They don't discuss anything, not at all, until somebody gets pissed off, and then they're about ready to come to fisticuffs. Mm-hmm. And that's not how it should operate. And David Gibbs is doing a good job trying to change that. But he's by himself for the most part. Him and Greg Poole is trying to help him too, but 2 out of the 5 is not doing, it's hard to get anything accomplished.
I agree. We need ethical conflicts fully addressed and dealt with before anyone's ever elected.
Oh yeah, there's got to be safeguards in place. Like, I've talked to several people, and I think you probably agree, we need an application process for people appointed to the tax assessors board or the planning commission. You shouldn't just be able to pick any Joe Blow just to go be appointed to a job. I mean, what are their qualifications? I mean, why would you appoint somebody that's not an accountant or good with numbers to the tax assessors board? Don't have the qualifications. I mean, how do they even begin to handle that type of job? You just can't do things like that and be efficient.
I see 2 resolutions to that. I saw this let me tell you a little story about appointees. I did file an ethics complaint against Kathy Cooper back in 2023 for this very issue. I believe it's 2023. Yes, May, somewhere around May or April of 2023, and it was over this issue of how are you a real estate agent and still make decisions in this process? And they withdrew the entire application for the subdivision. It was in the Gainesville Times. What I had stumbled on, unbeknownst at the time, was that Hall County had not complied with uh, the disclosure forms of saying I have a financial conflict. If you notice, those forms that some of the commissioners submit, I have an ethical conflict or financial conflict. I have to recuse myself from this. Those did not start until 2024, 2023. And the reason is because that ethical complaint that I filed,
Right.
it simply didn't have the right paperwork. And no one had asked these basic questions. Sure, you can chatter about them. You could have a Facebook group and say this is wrong. It's like the group is talking to each other. But the action of filing an ethics complaint actually prompted that those forms being filed by all the commissioners when they have an ethical or financial conflict. I can't say it's done all the time. I don't know, but ethics are a little bit like being pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant.
Right.
If it's one case, a small referral that a real estate agent would get from their position, that is still an ethical problem because they're getting
Right.
paid for that job to do the real estate work, and they're making decisions on real estate. You don't know how that will come up and um, be a factor later on down the line for properties or various impacts. So there's referral money, there's listings. When a person becomes a county commissioner, they're suddenly in the spotlight, right? And if they have a real estate license, they're going to get more listings. It's just
Yeah.
logical. That in itself is using the public service job to get um, to enhance their business.
Well, yeah, that's like Stan Hunt, case in point on the planning commission. We've got quotes from some people at Norton where Stan Hunt had just done $1 million worth of cabinet work for one section of the Norton industry, just from his job in the planning commission. I mean, that ends up, it may not have started as a conflict, but when you start using your ties on the planning commission or any other commission to monetize your work and yourself, I mean, that's when you start getting into the conflicts, and it's a fine line to walk. And your background, and see, people don't understand how far and wide the CDC stretches. I mean, it's not just Ebola and those major viruses. I mean, it gets into all walks of life. And you kind of even hinted at it with some of the works that you've been at. It gives you a neat perspective on how things should operate and can operate efficiently.
Thank you. I'll give some of the studies that I've done and some of the work I've done and how it's had a public impact on public health. I'll talk about 3 studies that I've less political speak and more like how you help people through policy and the use of data. If I'm elected, I'll be more driven, data-driven decisions. I have no financial incentive here. I have no ethical.
Hey, Gary. Sorry, the wind's blowing pretty hard, Mark. Hold on one second. Viral just joined us.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Mark, how you doing? What's up, Chris?
Thank you.
Viral, we're just going into some of Mark's accomplishments. Back he worked at the CDC for 30 years or whatever and retired back in 21, I think. And I just asked him about you know, people don't think that CDC, as big as it is, you know, people think Ebola and big viruses, but Mark's kind of giving us a little background on some of the papers and stuff that he's done that's worked in the healthcare, you know, in the healthcare industry that's had an impact.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. All right, Mark. Sorry. Now the wind's died down now. We'll be able to...
Sorry for the wind.
Yeah, no trouble.
So I'll also say there's some pretty strong rules in the federal government on board appointments. They have to be all vetted. Um, they're done by outside groups that are not necessarily friends to CDC, and the board appointments are actually a critical part of the ethical process. And we see this with the uh, influenza board and some of the things that are being dismantled now at the CDC. But um, there's that. And I also want to reemphasize that people at the federal government at a certain level simply can't hold two jobs. And the federal government realized a long time ago that you're a servant of the people, and we pay you well, right? Here's your job. We pay you well. There's no need to have another job that is related to your work in any way, shape, or form. For example, we fired an attorney one time. Even at the level, she didn't have another job, right? She had a job for the federal government, but she had clients that were non-federal clients. And the federal government said, you can't do both because there's no way we could figure out who you're representing, and if they have a case against the government or some kind of beef against the government, who are you working for? And that basic concept is pretty clear. And with respect to real estate, who are you working for? Who the contracts? There was a April 9th contract that was overturned. It was a recommended body within Hall County that goes through this elaborate process, scoring process for contracts. And on April 9th, recently, the top person for I believe it was a water-related project, did not get the project. And that's very rare because once it's been vetted, it's been reviewed by lots and lots of people. To go against the grain of that scoring where there's hundreds of hours, maybe even thousands of hours going into the analysis of that contract and which contractor is best and who has the best track record. For a commissioner to go against that recommendation, that's their power. And there could be a very good reason behind doing it, but when we have an overall erosion of public trust, like we see now, the terminations of the planning commissioners, just the tip of the iceberg. Everything I've seen, we're getting ready to have a major election, and we have to really pay attention to the ethics of everybody, myself included.
Right.
As you ask about I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, case in point, Kathy's not had a real estate license since 2024. She didn't renew it, but she's still selling properties. And I'm not going to name a name, but there's one person that she sells a lot of property for behind the scenes. Everything he develops, she gets a cut of. You know, and it's unethical.
Yeah,
and
I'm aware.
And he's developing all up and down Union Church Road and 211, and you know, and it's just not right.
I agree. So back to the original question is, I'm more of a data-driven guy. I've some of the cases or the studies that I've worked with are million. One case in particular was 29 million records that was analyzed to come up with some good science and good policy change. I'll give you a couple examples that involve numbers and kind of real world experiences, how important data and policy are together, and get away from real estate conflicts and other agendas, which some could just be purely political. Data should really drive a lot of these decisions that are being made. For example, in I think there's a 2007 paper, we were able to show, excuse me, by following the Brain Trauma Foundation guidelines for traumatic brain injury. Give you a little background. Neurologists treat traumatic brain injury, and there's a set of guidelines that if the neurologists are supposed to follow. Now you have some that are old school. They don't read up on the research. They say, nah, I'm not going to do it that way. Some of it's resource based. But we compared the hospitals that followed the Brain Trauma Foundation guidelines to those that didn't. Excuse me, to look at the health outcomes. We calculated through an overall cost savings of $4.1 billion. That was 2008, 2007 dollars. That is a lot of money just for policy, just by looking at data and just saying this is the better way to do it. Where are we doing this? And what we found after that, it was a combination of savings in medical cost, rehabilitation cost, societal cost. Societal costs are huge because if you have somebody who is in a vegetative state or can't perform work, or somebody has to care for them, that is a huge cost to society. And we also were able to save on paper 3,607 lives. And that is just an estimate of, if we do it this way, this are better health outcomes than we do it. This is the way we're doing it now. And that just speaks to it's not about Mark Faul, it's not about the study I did, but it's an example, a powerful example, I think, of how we can apply some of those same principles to Hall County. Why are we doing it this way? What are the options? Get the good ideas out. When you have corruption out there, there's a suppression of good ideas by definition.
Right.
Control. It's information control. It's activity control. I give that example. I'm going to give another example here too. We were responsible for setting national policy for the transport of EMS to trauma systems. The ambulatory trucks, where do they go, right? The patient has a lot to say on where they go. Well, they say, I want to go to the best hospital it is. That, of course, if you have a cut, that you don't want to go to the best hospital because it could be treated elsewhere. And those type of transport decisions are oftentimes made by the EMS personnel, but they don't know everything. They don't know about the whole system necessarily. So there was a field triage guideline developed by the CDC, or it was developed by another group, and then the CDC enhanced it with over 250 research articles of how they do it around the world, not just in the United States. And these transport decisions are absolutely critical because they save money. We have elite trauma centers that treat the worst of the worst. If everybody went to the elite trauma centers, the people who really need the treatment there would not be able to receive that care. And through the implementation of the guidelines that we worked on, through data, we found that we saved $568 million just by transporting the people to the right place, reduction in trauma care overload. And the interesting thing about it, the one piece was rollovers on cars. Cars, if there was an automobile accident, the old way of thinking was that's a serious wreck. And it is, there's no question. But with people now wearing seatbelts, it's not nearly as serious.
Yeah.
And policy had not caught up with that. And that's the kind of power that data has, that you can really dive into an issue and see something that we all kind of know, but pop it out with data and then change the policy. And it freed up some of the heavy burdens, the overcrowding in trauma centers. Can I give one more example?
Yeah.
I hope this is interesting.
No, it is. No, I'm interested in this stuff.
So naloxone is the technical name for Narcan for drug overdose. What we at CDC did, what I did, is I looked at the 29 million records used in the EMS system for naloxone Narcan delivery. EMS is often the first group of people on a site after a drug overdose, and there's a couple issues with that when we got to fix. One was that intermediate and beginner EMS folks could never be allowed to administer naloxone because only a paramedic could do that legally. And so we got the rules changed. That saved a bunch of lives because a lot of times in mostly rural areas where there weren't paramedics, they would go to a scene, can't legally give Narcan, someone's dying, call in a paramedic, they get there, they're dead. And
Right.
so it didn't make any sense so I was able to show data. This is how many lives we could save if we just loosen up the rules and allow this narcotic, Narcan, to be allowed to be administered by EMS people with lower levels of training and lower levels of certification. Those simple changes in policy and data driven really do save lives. And that kind of thinking applied to a county level is, I think, is a wonderful asset. And it's one of the reasons why I'm in the race. I'll give one more example if you don't mind. Is it
Yeah,
okay?
that's good.
So, we also found with the 29 million records of all EMS, I looked at it on a per patient basis. We found that there were many more double administrations, triple administrations of Narcan given to the patient on the scene. And why is that important? Because every time you don't reverse a drug overdose on the scene, every bit longer, they're in heart attack, they're in cardiac arrest, they're not breathing. That's one step closer to death. So the old version of Narcan was developed in 1971. No one ever made any changes to the formula. And so what we were finding is that there were multiple administrations, more and more. The multiple administrations increased by 26%. And the reason why is because the opioid environment out there had changed. The introduction of fentanyl was a much more powerful drug. So we needed a more powerful drug to reverse the drug overdose. Now, regardless of where you come out on drug overdose, it's a life is a life is a life.
Yeah, no doubt.
We're here to serve the public and do everything we can to save lives within reason. And this was just a matter of going to the FDA and saying, let's change the chemical makeup of Narcan to make it stronger. After a little bit of pushback from different interest groups and whatnot, it was mostly the intranasal administration of naloxone, which through the nose like a nasal thing instead of intravenous. Right. That was a better way to get it into the EMS system and to allow intermediate and beginning EMS people to administer it. But we found a powerful effect by using data. We were able to go to the FDA. FDA then approved the more heftier use of Narcan, and it's one of the interventions that is working to decline the impact of drug overdose. Drug overdose is down, and that's powered by data. This is a very powerful story. All these are, and a scientist typically doesn't brag about their work. This is not me bragging. This could be anybody. I could be citing anybody's science. The issue is how someone uses data to make better decisions.
Right.
And, I've just had a blessed career, and why doesn't that? I think it can easily transfer over to Hall County Public Service in the.
Well, it can, and like we talked about just a little earlier about how this is basically you got one little small clique running everything for the most part. They don't, the commissioners and the planning commission and all, they don't listen to the public. They don't care what the public says for the most part. And that's driven by conflicts of interest. And the The way I look at it is we're a small town becoming a more urbanized area, and the old guard and the people that are here still want things to be like a small town. Like when somebody gets appointed to the board, like Bradley Dunkel, who's got a huge conflict of interest because he works for one of the biggest developers around, to the planning commission. Everybody saying, oh, he's a great guy. He's this, he's that. Well, he may be a great guy. That does not matter. That is not the point. And that's the thinking we've got to change. And, and how would what are your thoughts on that and your recommendations of how we can get the public to understand that these decisions can't be made by good guys? They've got to be made in the best interest of everybody involved.
I think Corey. I know very little about Corey Anderson, but what I've seen about him, I like him. I like him. He's a pleasant person, and we can exchange ideas, I believe. But in a sense, that doesn't matter when we're serving the public. The public needs to know that we have freedom from ethical conflicts, even if they're small. They should not arise, because what's happened in District 1 is those little conflicts that probably started out in the beginning, people got away with it, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as the person gets more powerful. They get more connections. We all know the routine. I am free from that. I don't develop property. I talk to the grapes. That's about it. So I don't have any. We sell $12 glasses of wine here. There's no conflict there. It's a little bit shocking to see all this go on, and I agree with your premise. It's not the person is good. That's important. You have to relate with people, but really what someone does and the leadership that they can provide to bring back the level of public trust that's needed in Hall County. I'm not saying they have to be an outsider, and I'm not an outsider. I've been here for 30 years in Gwinnett and Hall County. But we see it a little differently, I would say. I think that's accurate. And case in point, when the property next to me didn't sell for years, it was listed with Norton, and then the family went and approached a county commissioner for the real estate listing because the landowner always wanted to have it developed. And so that is a county commissioner who is a real estate agent, might as well just be wearing the badge of the real estate company on their shirt. And it's a pretty powerful distinction. It's important to make sure that we're free of conflicts as much as possible.
Right. Well, it was like Kathy Cooper. She recused herself on the Winder Highway property on the first vote, but now, since her real estate license had expired, she unrecused herself on the second vote to be sure that other addition went through. And I know Viral and I have talked about this a lot. That should have been thrown out 100% right then. And that's one reason why Jody White has started her lawsuits against the county to stop this stuff. And it's a shame that one resident and our small team working behind the scenes is having to fight for the whole county like this, where, it should be everybody's pissed off about it.
Well, I think Jody White and Vicki McDermott, they've done a good job of raising some of these public trust issues. I think it's very, very important. I think it's up to the leadership of those groups and people like myself to channel that in effective ways to make the change. It's one thing to be talking to yourselves, but it needs solutions. It needs action. And I think really the most powerful thing you can do is not sue. The most powerful thing you can do right now to change this is get the right people to actually make the decisions.
Right.
Voting, it's voting thing, it's not necessarily a lawsuit thing. Yeah, that'll get the attention. It'll probably be settled. It'll be quiet. Everyone signs an agreement saying they won't disclose the details. Does that affect policy change? It's not as powerful as getting the right people on the job.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But at some point, you've got to put your foot down and say, "Hey, we're not taking it anymore." Because basically, like Bill and I talked about this before with Tyler Crawford on. Now we've got developers going up there saying, "You either approve what we're doing, or we're going to sue." Threatening the county commission, and and that's just not how it should operate.
Well, the property right,
It's fundamentally broken when that stuff happens.
Well, I mean, part of what has happened, and there's not been a lot of attention on this, is that the comprehensive land plan was altered in 2024 to make a lot of the a lot denser property. I think it went from 2.5 per acre, which is very, very dense when you think about it.
Oh yeah.
When you add it, because sidewalks and roads are all exempt from the calculations. Stream buffers are exempt from the calculations. So it's not, I mean, we can visually imagine what an acre is and then 2.5 homes on it, but that's not the way it's calculated. It exempts roads, it exempts sidewalks, it exempts some of the infrastructure. And so when you start adding up all that concrete, you have a lot of problems with the water, the rainwater, especially during heavy rains, to simply absorb into the remaining ground. It's all concrete, it's all roofs. But the bigger point is that was changed, I believe, either to 2.2 or 2.0. And that was done with a list of steering group committee that reads like a who's of developers in Hall County and people with special interest. Tyler Crawford does an excellent presentation of this. And it was just like, wow, I didn't even know that. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense why things are this way. But just to get public input. And then at one point, one person in planning and zoning approached me, said me, I'm so glad you had some input on this new comprehensive development plan. I said, I had no input. Don't put my name on anything. I had no input at all. And that was probably a mistake on her part, but we need public input. We stop looking at citizens like there's some group to be dealt with and start including them more and more in the process. And that's the ticket to get public trust restored in Hall County. And we're not going to do it by voting in the same old type thinking people. The real estate thing is a known conflict. It's well known. More people that think and do and behave that way is just not healthy for the county.
Well, no, and we talked about it last show, like the development authority. The commission gets to promote, choose one of them to help develop the UDC and all that. But the development authority gets to name the two candidates they get to choose from. And that's not in the best interest of the county or the commission. I mean, they keep recycling the same names over and over, and there's never any outside coming in. I mean, what would your ideal makeup be to make the comprehensive code? Like doctors, lawyers, citizens? I mean, you got to have some developers on there because they're an expert in their field, but it can't be the overwhelming majority.
Well, developers aren't necessarily the expert.
No, some of them are.
Yeah, so they're expert in finances, and they've picked up a lot of things along the way. But people like hydrologists who look at the water flow, who have a lot of experience with that. Water flow is critically important. I'm gonna off topic maybe a little bit here, but I'm next to a subdivision called Grandview, and I have 20 acres here. And since I've been here for the last 20 years, I've seen the overflow from that subdivision. I've lost 6 feet of dirt over that time, that have gullies. And those are all approved by, the land, the permit, the land disturbance permit process. And they're just simply wrong. They're just simply wrong. But we need that kind of expertise, more of it, more certification for those kind of folks. Those kind of folks could be helpful. I know that's a little bit at odds with what I said, but those kind of folks that are not in the pockets of the developers, we need those kind of people with good certification, good engineering skills to come in and look at an area. The case in point, Hall County has an engineering department. They don't care. If there's an engineering stamp, they don't care if it's lenient engineer or strict engineer. They don't care if it's development engineer, powered engineer, which they all are because they're hired by the development, or somebody who's really a stickler for every drop of water, because there's a lot of judgment in those kinds of designs. We need more certification. We need to tighten down that process. But your question goes back to the overall, how do we get more public involved? I think you bring up a good point as far as the application process for these county commissioners. They should not be appointed by the commissioners themselves. There could be an outside group, a third-party private sector group, come up with applicants. Here's the application process. People apply if you want. And that third-party group has no affiliation with Hall County. They can check the ethical conflicts and get some new names on them. There's good people to fill those spots, especially with the growth of the county. It doesn't have to be, well, John, I know John over here, he's done this before. We'll get him back in and do that. There's all kinds of ways that we can bring in citizens into boards. Hall County recently did. When we had our legal conflict with Hall County when it began, I said, well, I've, to dovetail into your question, I said, well, I've contacted a lot of lawyers in Hall County and nobody wants to take this case. And the reason is because they're getting business from Hall County.
Right.
The government hires them and they just simply don't want to bite the hand that feeds them because the government will have a long memory. And so we had to go pretty far out to get an attorney that would actually take the case. And because even Atlanta firms represent Hall County. Just one of the little factoids that's everybody knows everybody and it's business as usual. But we need to figure out how to get more citizen involvement. Initially, when I said to planning and zoning, says, well, I don't agree with the zoning decision. It hurts me a lot, and it hurts a lot of my neighbors. Is there a zoning board of appeals? Because look, Forsyth County has one. It includes citizens from Forsyth County on the commission itself. They would have a check and balance process. Because we don't have anything like that. You'll have to file a lawsuit. Well, so there are simple ways there are simple ways that we could tweak the process to bring in citizens who are knowledgeable and are fair. It's a little hard to find, get the right people in, but some kind of good quality citizen input into some of these zoning decisions and take away some of the power of the county commissioners because right now they have too much power. People do not understand how much power they really have.
Oh yeah.
So I'm kind of my story's choppy here, but so I went back I said to Beth Garman, who I really liked. She was a wonderful administrator in Hall County. And I said, these counties do it this way. Do we have a process? No, have to file a lawsuit. Okay, well, that was expensive, and that's still ongoing. It's been going on almost 2 years now. And it doesn't move the policy. There's been no change in policy. It's still being wrangled. The only thing it's hurting the taxpayers of Hall County because they're paying to defend the terrible zoning decision that exceeded the comprehensive land development plan density, and they're paying for the legal fees right now. And then I'm paying and others are paying to keep the suit alive and stop the development. But these are terrible ways. If we could just get more involvement where it matters, not Facebook groups necessarily talking to themselves, which that's got a lot of energy, but channel that energy in such a way to help make the process more acceptable, have the public win the public trust back.
Right.
Well, I think this election, I think, is going to have a lot to say in that. Are the citizens just going to sit on Facebook and be keyboard warriors, or are they going to show up to the polls and actually push for actual change? So we'll find out soon.
And Bill, I think we talked about it. Isn't the density for apartments like 8.5 per acre or something? I mean,
It's like 8 per acre or something like that.
Yeah. The 2.5 for homes or townhomes, but it's like 8.5 if you build apartments.
Mm-hmm.
That's why all these apartments are going up now. They're maximizing the density of how they build, and it's just that's not a good thing either, building all these apartments, because history shows within 10 to 15 years they're not kept up, ownership changes, and they turn into really, not downtrodden neighborhoods, but they're not as nice as they once were.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of these rezonings have been in place for 20, 30 years that were done a long time ago for apartments. So a lot of these are just getting developed now because they've already been rezoned for a long time. I don't know that we've had a lot of new rezonings come in for apartments specifically in the county, or even in the city. But yeah.
Case in point, there's a new development the zoning was approved in 2006. That was 20 years ago.
Right.
And it's right here off of Sasser Road. And I spoke out at the city council twice about it. The fact that the application requests annexation into Flowery Branch City. And the reason why is they simply want sewer. They can't develop it without sewer.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that some of these developments have been put on hold for a long time because of infrastructure issues.
Right. And that's bad for the county because Flowery Branch gets all the benefit, but the county, the schools and the EMS and all that comes from county resources, and we get nothing in return. I mean, it's a drain on county resources. And there has to be some kind of a fine or some kind of an agreement to where the cities and the counties have to share some of these resources when land is annexed in just to get sewer or whatever. And the burden falls on the county taxpayers.
Mark, so talking about your data-driven analytics and decision-making process from the CDC, is there anything in the county specifically that you've seen, just as an example of that could easily be applied to, and stuff that you already kind of see, like, we could dramatically change this?
Well, the low-hanging fruit is taxes. It's the county assesses a property. If you haven't noticed, the assessments for Hall County have absolutely gone through the roof. And they don't fit a typical pattern that you find in most counties. The assessments are very, very high. They typically don't reach the full market value in most counties. So what I would like to do is to look at the assessment ratio of what the county says the property is worth, and look at what the private sector says the property is worth, and we'll see. I suspect we'll see a lot of imbalances in what is found compared to other counties, because we're all in the process over the last 3 years paying for a new courthouse that we didn't know till legally recently. We didn't know that was on. Some people knew, but public knowledge is only really come around recently, and so the county's been banking funds for a while, but that's part of the erosion of trust. Why didn't the county just say, we're doing it? We don't know where. Give us some public input.
From the beginning. Yeah.
Really just dive into it. But I would say low-hanging fruit right now is the assessment for property taxes. It's in some areas it's absolutely gone through the roof.
Oh, it's terrible.
I'm sorry?
I said, oh, it's terrible. Like this property, I mean, it's increased in value almost 70% over the last 4 years. Done no improvements, no nothing. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, since I've been involved with resisting Hall County, one of my properties has gone up in assessed value 300%.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's just, and then your taxes go through the roof, and then they wonder why people have trouble paying their taxes, and then they want to come and say, oh, we cut your taxes by rolling the millage rate back. Well, you roll the millage rate back 1%, your property value goes up anywhere from 30 to, in your example, 300%. You've not saved me a dime. You cost me thousands and thousands of dollars, and we see that all over.
County commissioners have the power to freeze assessments. They have the power to roll back millage rates. We need to do instead of hiding behind the numbers and doing this magic formula in the background, we need to get into, and what are other counties doing? Let's look at it, really dive into it on a more analytical end and see how Hall County is, I suspect, disproportionately paying higher property taxes relative to their overall true assessed value.
Right. And I think one of the issues is Hall County, I can't remember the software, right? They use a appraisal software where they just plug in numbers and they use like a nationwide database to kind of tell.
Is that GMAS?
Yeah, GMAS. They use GMAS, and they're not actually got boots on the ground going out and looking at these properties. A lot of times, the only way your property gets looked at is if you ask for an appeal and they come out and actually inspect your property. And I think that is a lot of the issue. They don't really know exactly what's going on these properties. And, and a lot of times they find it just by Google Maps or something, by accident. Is there a way to increase that without increasing the budget and hiring a bunch of people to go out and look at properties? I mean, is there a happy medium anywhere?
Well, I think the answer again is in data. I guess I'll part with you a little bit. Does the county have resources to look at every single house, do some kind of? A lot of times they can't even get in the house. I would say this could be more of an electronic thing because we're not pinpointing an appraised value. We should be at a fair. The goal is fair taxation,
Right.
and we can do that through data. Pretty sophisticated data techniques to try to figure out how and if we're being taxed so much differently than other counties. And I hear a lot of stories about it, pockets of it's real high here, can't figure out why. Well, let's do a systematic approach and with the strong methods, the defensible methods, and bring in some private sector data because Zillow has all our property values, what they think it's worth. Ever since I started being interested in politics, my property values far exceed the Zillow amount.
Right.
Not my personal. I'm not on a vendetta here or anything, but if it's happening to me, it's happening to other people, and other people's I've seen are virtually unaffected. So put some light on it, analyze it, and figure out how to fix whatever is broken if problems are verified through data analysis.
Right.
You can also do some kind of neural network to see who gets contracts and see what their relationships are with people, similar to what Doge did on the federal level. Find the relationships and see where names point back to people in power.
Right. And around here, that's easy to fine. And that's, we've got to, and I think a lot of it is now we see some of these, a lot of people call them the games with Godfathers. They're losing a grip on their power, but just number one, naturally because of growth, there's more people moving in. And number two, now people are waking up to saying, oh my God, how long has this been going on? And I think that's the dynamic we're seeing right now. And the only way to push that forward is more transparency. Like, example, talk to old commissioners, they said it was a full-time job. They always were on the phone. They're answering constituents' phone calls, emails, out in the community. And now we're hearing nobody on the commission does that. There's no outreach with the community. There's no returning phone calls. There's no returning emails. I mean, do you think that being more outgoing as commissioners would rectify a lot of these situations?
Well, as I said at one point during this podcast, being a county commissioner is a thankless job at some level. People are upset. This is a heightened period of time. People know something's wrong, and they may not be able to put their finger on it, but they don't trust. And it's become a more hostile job because there are limits to what a county commissioner can do, a lot of limits, but they also have a lot of inherent power. We want commissioners to say, I voted this way for this zoning because of XYZ. But I suspect they're, with the contentious environment that we have in Hall County, all the commissioner meetings are full to the brim of just the hostility right now. They're reluctant to say anything because of the maybe some legal concerns, or just if you turn left you get whacked, you turn right you get whacked. We want a more positive environment where county commissioners can talk to people and really do have discussion. You only do that in a free of conflict environment, and we don't have that today.
Right.
My goal would be to promote that very positive relationship between the constituents and the commissioner. It's critically important, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Well, no, and case in point, I wasn't going to bring it up until Tyler brought it out yesterday on a YouTube video. Case in point, at one of the GOP meetings, he brought up the influence the Norton agency has on policy. And he wasn't trying to dog them out. I mean, it's a fact. They have so many people on all these boards and committees, and Frank puts out this yearly forecast, and it's a major influence on what goes on. They sent him a cease and desist letter demanding him take down all the videos and publicly apologize, or they were going to sue him. They're trying to intimidate him into bringing out any conflicts. And and stuff like that has got to stop. I mean, you can't have these developers and real estate agents and stuff going around suing potential candidates and regular citizens for speaking out. He didn't say anything disparaging. He just brought to light of all the power that they have in town.
I think the story speaks for itself, right?
Yeah, I mean,
protecting their power base. I've been to, over the years, I've been invited. I think about 10 years ago I was invited. I looked at the data and what they call data analysis. I mean, there were some basic numbers, but they would say things that didn't necessarily play out in the summary data. And that's as a person who's trained in methods and data analysis, I didn't get to the conclusions that they were making.
right.
Freedom of speech as citizens, they have products, and it would seem like they're open to criticism just as we are. I don't know what the legal aspects of that would be, but I'd be interesting. I would be interesting. It would be interesting to learn a little bit more about that case. And they're pretty well established in the community. It's been decades.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to learn more about that actually.
Okay. But yeah, it's and one thing is, and we had talked about it before, or you brought it up, and we've talked about it. People don't understand that the county commissioners are limited to what they can do. If somebody brings a plan and it fits the UDC and the comprehensive plan, it's very hard to deny. I mean, if you do, as a commissioner, you're going to end up in court. But there are ways to mitigate costs to the taxpayers and put costs more on the developers than the taxpayers. How would you what would be your plan to hold developers more accountable to paying for the infrastructure for these subdivisions and developments and not have the taxpayer foot the bill for all of it?
So there's a couple of questions there. The county commissioners, they do have a lot of power. I would disagree with that a little bit. What I've seen in the legal case that I've been involved with is that courts have been educated by attorneys when we were trying to seek representation. County commissioners are legislators.
Right.
They are viewed as the court as a legislative body for the county, and they have the power to implement variances, grant variances on all kinds of stuff. I question how far that power goes, but this court system is generally going to defer to all county commissioners' decisions as being proper and right because they're an elected body, and courts are always reluctant to overturn elective bodies, whether it be at the state or federal level. These county commissioners, they don't say legislation, but that's what they are. They've been elected by the people. And that automatically gives them a tremendous amount of power. From a challenging standpoint, I've been educated. I'm no lawyer, but they have, like I said, there's some boundaries, and I really shouldn't speak about lawyer stuff, even though I'm pretty sure I'm right. I'm not an attorney, and we should be afraid of that power a little bit.
Right.
We've seen the land. I've seen a lot of people talk about the land comprehensive use plan, and like that's the Bible, but they can overrule the Bible. In terms of legislation, the 2.5 density in the proposed subdivision near me, was the legal limit the limit according to the plan was 2.5. Well, they exceeded that, and so what's the use of having a comprehensive use plan if you're not going to follow it? And it turns out that the county commission can actually overrule some of their own material, and that's that. So I would question the presumption that county officials can't do a lot, but they have a lot of judgment. They should have judgment. There's times when the variances don't make sense. The rules don't make sense. I gave you a great example. The 20 acres that are here, the county said, well, you got to build a fence all around the 20 acres if you want to have a winery. And I said, why? What was? Because it's in this document. It's in the commercial document because I'm building a commercial building. That doesn't make any sense. That would cost $500,000. It goes through trees. It wouldn't make any sense at all. So they have to use their power wisely, is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the last part of your question.
Oh, how would you make the developers? How would they burden most of the taxpayers? The infrastructure, like instead of the county having to pave roads or build sidewalks. I mean, if you're wanting to develop 30 acres and the road's not wide enough, why should that fall on the county when you're the one that knew the road wasn't wide enough. You want to develop it, you should be responsible for the infrastructure getting to it, and making any improvements.
So I can speak to the developments that I'm familiar with. The burdens are on the developer to bring in sewer. They have to pay for the sewer pipe all the way in on the development going in near me. They have to pay for the electricity. That's the state of Georgia, I believe. All power lines have to be accessible to everyone. So the power company brings that. They're the only ones that I believe are forced to pay the infrastructure cost. The actual gas. I tried. I don't have gas in front of my property, natural gas. I would have to pay that, and so would a developer bring the gas line. So, in a sense, that is the way to do it. Once it's done, then it's transferred to the county. Now, one of my platforms is to build, pay for infrastructure. When I speak of infrastructure, I want to support more schooling, more education, really bring our standards up to some of the more national levels in state of Georgia levels. But the overall answer to your are paying for some of that, and that's one of the reasons why a house costs so much money. Um, the estimate to bring in sewer from the developers, they have to bring in a pumping station. Those are all developer costs. That is that was in the area of $4 million. You have to ask yourself, why does a developer want to pay $4 million? Because still so profitable when you develop the land. But the infrastructure, mostly in the sewer area, to more gallons per, that is actually born. The source of where the sewer processing is basically government owned. So those infrastructure costs are borne by the taxpayers, but however, to bring it from the source to the development are borne by the developer.
Right. Because I know a lot of what we've seen in the past is a lot of these developers, they'll agree to do something, and say 4 years down the line, it still hadn't been done, and the county commission gets mad, and they just say, oh, just to get this project finished, we will pave the road, or we'll do that.
I see.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, we don't want those costs to come back on taxpayers when we were not counting on that being part of the deal.
Well, they could always hold an what's the word? Earnest money on the side. Developer, we're going to put this amount of earnest money for this project, walking trails through the park. Those are typically when a developer says they're going to do, oh, we're going to do walking trails here. The whole Mall of Georgia, one of the selling points was walking trails throughout the property. There's a few walking trails, but not very many.
Exactly.
So I've seen this before. Oh yeah, we're going to put a swim and tennis right here, and then when they do it, oh well, we did away with that. From a citizen, a resident standpoint, that's the wrong thing line we're talking about. So what the county can do is simply grab some earnest money and say, well, here's 50% of the cost of the something. In this case, it'd be walking trails, which seems minor, but we're not going to let you go through this project unless you really put your money where your mouth is. So there's that. Um, that would be a pretty common sense solution.
Right. Now, what about, you were talking about, the Verily brought it up, and you had talked about it, where some of these zonings have been in place 20 years. Like on Browns Ridge Road, the new hotel that Jeff Payne's building, that was owned in 1993, 94, and they never did anything with it. And he's putting that big luxury resort out there. And what would you be for a cutoff if they hadn't developed within 5 years? Then it goes back to the prior zoning, or what would be your solution for that? Because when that was approved, Crestwind was not even thought of back then. So now we're going to have those two major developments on Browns Ridge Road, and that road cannot handle it.
So yeah, that I actually brought that up at the Flowery Branch annexation. You know, how can this property be zoned for townhomes in a rural area, heavy rural area, uh, in 20 in 2006, and here it is 2026. How's that legal? So if there's a way, certainly legally, if we can put an expiration date on the zoning, I think that's a great idea. Um, yeah, that's because what the way the county is in 2006 is not the way it is in 2026 at all.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And that's a great. That's I was questioning why that is even allowed to happen, but I know who do you? I was questioning the air basically, and didn't really have an answer. I think if we have power as commissioners to terminate the high density zoning or the zoning decisions at a certain date, we should exercise that.
Yeah. Now, do you have your? I don't know if you're familiar with how. I'm sure you are, the bidding process. Like when they bid jobs out or they want to build something. The county, the school board, and the county, they've got a bad habit of saying, "Oh, we've got $100 million. Give us what you can for that," instead of saying, "Hey, this is what we need. Give us your best price." I mean, that could save the county millions and millions of dollars to get people to say those project managers and those construction companies or whoever trying to do it as cheap instead of saying, "Oh, we can do this because it falls under the $100 million cap." I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, have you seen any data or I mean, would that save the county millions? Common sense says it should, but I don't know if it's feasible.
Mm. Well, the contractor is going to want to know how much the project is awarded. The federal government generally, when they issue a grant, the grant is this price, and the federal government. Not saying they get everything right, but in this case, with the federal government, everyone can apply for it, and it becomes uh, a market-based kind of system where everyone has access to it. Perhaps perhaps there's some medium between what you're saying. We have this many dollars to spend. Now bid up to this. That's obviously poor business management. But this seems like, from a fairness standpoint, they could give a range. They could say, on this project, we're going to do from A to B, and it's under our decision to to kill it at any time during the request RFP process. So that would get away from that. But the federal government benefits because anyone can apply for a federal grant. So I would ask the question, not so much what the cap is for the actual RFP, but ask the question, how many people are we getting to bid on the project that will make bids more competitive? Because the company has an incentive to bid at the lower price if they know they're competing with, 10 different companies or 5 different companies. If it's going out to Joe and Harry Engineering down the street, then that micro advertising could be a problem. That's the kind of thing I would look at.
But
And
like Daryl, right? Isn't it? Most of the county bids go out to 3 or 4 different contractors who are the only ones that ever bid the work, if I'm thinking correctly.
Yeah, so from what I've been looking at on the doing business with Hall County page, some of the bigger stuff, a lot of the bigger contracts is usually 2 or 3. I've seen for like landscaping, uniforms, vehicle purchases, etc. They'll get a bid from about 4 or 5 different companies now, and most of them tend to be local that they usually go with, but they have a way of going through. They have their own. The county has their own process of how they score them, and just to make sure that we're not always taking the lowest bid, because that also raises some concerns. why are you so much cheaper than everybody else? Yeah, and like for example, just recently, I think Hall County Park and Leisure had a maintenance contract that was up for award just I think this past voting meeting. The lowest bid was about $100,000 less than what the nearest the second lowest was, and so that certainly raised some questions as to, are they going to be able to get it done, or are we going to have to go cancel this later on and fire these people because they can't do the job for what they quoted it at, and then have to go back to the second highest. And so Brent and his team with the Park and Leisure Department said that they've done their homework with it. They think they can handle it within their constrained budget. So yeah, I think as long as we get, I would say at least a minimum of 3-4 bids for any given project, bid, job, etc. I think that's fair, and as long as the documents are easily accessible to the public to be able to review it too, just to get an external audit in a sense.
When we did grants for the federal government, I used to make decisions on funding on opioids or trauma services. We would typically see about 20 to 50 applicants. And with that, you would get a much tighter, high performing group of people because they did want the federal job, the dollars, and they were incentivized to get the funding. So I guess I would work to try to get those numbers up, making sure that we attract business from other counties, and making sure we have a competitive bid process.
Yeah, that's the key, because I would say more than half the work in this county goes to Carroll Daniel. I mean, it's just almost a given. And the main reason is they do a lot of work. They do decent work, but they're very familiar with it. The county's familiar with each other. But at the same time, that familiarity can also bring in some questionable work or dealing sometimes, because as a builder, you may go, oh, they're not going to check on that, or they're not going to worry about this. And as the county, they say, oh, we can trust them. They've done a great job, and I just see that turns into a big conflict of interest there. And like you're saying, we just need to make it to where more people are accessible and want to bid our jobs. Like a lot of people say, well, why bid it? Because these other companies going to get it anyway. Why waste our time?
Right. I want to also say, a little off topic here, but one of the things that I'd like to bring up too with some of these developments is a lot of these corporations. The argument for high density is we need more lower end housing. Well, once the developer pays for all the infrastructure, we don't have lower. We have high priced little homes, and so what's happening, and we've seen it all across the nation, that rental corporations, BlackRock in particular, they'll go in and they'll buy swaths of large housing units from places like Georgia. I mean, Georgia, there was a report out recently that said for these hedge fund managers, Georgia is the number one state where companies like BlackRock are coming in and buying low income housing or medium income housing for rentals. So all of our zoning decisions should have some kind of clause on it, that some way of restricting rental, large companies from doing just that, buying large swaths of housing and turning it into rentals. We want, because it doesn't achieve the purpose of what the advocates are saying. We want lower cost housing. Well, the company comes in and buys it. It's typically not. It's going to be overpaid at that time by that company. We've all seen this in action. We've all seen.
I don't know that that's feasible for a lot of our real estate agents in the county commission. I don't know that it makes profitable sense for them to do that.
Right. And
Because
we
essentially a lot
get,
of these developments are for the likes of BlackRock and national, I think, real estate investment trusts to just come in and buy them up, and they're not necessarily built for the purpose of actually serving what the developer claimed, which is affordable housing for the community.
right.
That's what I'm saying. I would want to put clauses in the zoning itself to restrict the
Right.
retail to national corporations.
Right. And what's your thought about, and it's happening all over the country, the boomers are putting in all these restrictions on these subdivisions. Oh, you got to have 2,500 square feet minimum. It's got to be brick. It's got to be hardy plank. It's got to be, and it's making these houses unaffordable. A mid-20 young professional can't go buy a $300,000 home.
Right.
What's wrong with building like we used to, 12 to 1,600 square foot ranch homes, starter homes, and they're not going to harm the value of these other homes as long as you build the subdivisions correctly and make sure that they have the proper sidewalks and the infrastructure. And I think that's something we've got to get back to instead of building $500,000 homes everywhere.
Right. Good point. My first house was 900 square feet. It was a 2-bedroom house.
Right.
And I learned a lot of do it yourself projects, and just there's a lot of value in just fixing up your own home. But those homes don't exist anymore.
No, they don't.
They're very, very hard to find.
Yeah, and we've got to get back to that because all these homes that are that size, they're getting to be 50, 60 years old and they're money pits. They're turning into money pits, and that's why they turn into these dilapidated rental homes, and the neighborhoods get run down and the families don't want to keep them anymore. And it's a vicious cycle. And we've got to get back to looking for our young people where they don't feel so exasperated. Hey, I can't even afford a home.
Totally agree. Those rundown homes are also invite crime.
Oh, they do. And it's what would moving forward, what would be your goal for District 1 overall? Because we've got a lot of stuff going on with the building and everything. Is there more room to grow? I mean, is it, because we got a lot of people that are anti-growth, and that's how they're going to vote in this election, but that's just not feasible. We understand that. Anybody that thinks it through, you just got to manage it. What is just thinking of District 1, what is your comprehensive plan moving forward?
Well, first thing we need to clean up the ethics problem in District 1. There should never be a real estate agent, broker, someone who uses the power of government to enrich their own pocketbook real estate sales. We just that is fundamental. We can't move forward with the other things until that's fixed. We just can't do it. Other things is some rules like change of the comprehensive use plan to make the PRD developments harder and harder to approve. When a developer comes in, they all go toward the highest density they can do.
Yeah.
There's no agricultural. There's nothing wrong with, putting the agricultural zoning allows 1.8 homes per acre. I believe that's the figure. Well, you can get a pretty nice home for that. That's pretty nice, And
Right.
we need to have that balance back. Now, pretty much every plan submitted is high density, and so we've got to put somehow promotion on development in normal subdivisions the way it was 20 years ago, the way it was 10 years ago. I'm around Quailwood and Grandview. They're wonderful places to live. Eli Valley is a wonderful place to live. I realize land is not being made anymore, and I realize it's harder and harder to do developments like that. But it's good for the overall health of the community to keep it low density or reasonable density. And I don't think we should stop growth. It's a normal transition of property. As property owners have rights to, they have rights to sell their land. What they don't have the right to is to change the zoning without reasonable consideration of the whole area. I'll give you an example. This is zoning by taking is one of the terms, or taking by zoning. Uh, you can't put a brothel next to a house because the brothel, it's a silly example, but it brings it home. You can't change your zoning. Sure, that homeowner that owns the brothel, in theory, makes a lot more money. Well, that's not the only consideration. The consideration would be the impact on the entire area. And that's what we're kind of missing is the property rights of the existing people, the silent citizen that just looks around and says, well, these townhomes, now I open up my window, I'm going to see townhomes. There's one property in particular, it's worth $3.2 million. And they're 50 feet away from a PRD that is townhome heavy. And those are property right issues for people. And
Right.
so the comprehensive plan, I know that it's not being followed properly now, but we need to put some teeth into that, and we need to somehow make it easier for the zoning appeal process to really bring it back to the comprehensive land program or use plan. We also need to make sure that we have the setback restrictions not so tight. I mean, we have some developments that there's 15 feet of distance between house A and house B. That's not much of a house.
Yeah.
Can kids play in that kind of environment?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things need to be all looked at and changed. And it starts with getting the right. You can't get there unless you have the right people in place, and people that are free of ethical conflicts. That is fundamental, and that's what we're missing right now.
Right. And I know Tyler had brought up a good point. He says, how in the world can Flowery Branch get 10% of their citizens' input on the UDC and their comprehensive plan? Well, Hall County can't get but 200 or 300. So, I mean, how do you even develop a plan when you have no community input? I mean, how do you get that across to the people that, hey, you need to speak up if you want a say in this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember seeing it ever advertised for input. I was told after the fact, thanks for your input, Mark, but I had written so many letters about zoning, and I guess maybe she got confused. I said, I've never seen the plan. I can't endorse it. I can't look at it. And like I said, it's a who's of all the developers in Hall County, and that's we got to get citizen input back in. No one really. That's a very reasonable argument.
Yeah, no, throughout that whole process of them coming on with the new UDC, it wasn't very heavily advertised or anything. It was just like if you went by the planning and zoning department asking some questions, they might tell you, hey, we're in the process of doing that. Like that's it. And this is when there was a different director that stayed around for just a year, 2 years, Randy. And yeah.
Doverton.
Yeah, something like that. And she just kind of mentioned that to me. And I was kind of interested in being a part of it too, and just kind of being, involved in the whole process. But I never got told dates of when the meetings were, any particular inputs or steering committees or anything like that. And I've reached out to the planning and zoning department multiple times about data center usage, because data centers weren't in the old code. And so that was something that, I brought it up, and they were already considering adding it to the new UDC as far as a possible use case with a special use permit in industrial zonings. So Yeah, that I mean, to Mark's point, it wasn't very heavily advertised to get public opinion, and I think it's I hate to think this, but it was probably purposely done so that
Oh,
way.
it was definitely purposely done that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your point, Chris, how can people from different counties have a disproportional impact? We can simply solve that with using scientific approaches. We just randomize invitations. We say, okay, your name, you're the random person, you're 26 on this list, make sure it's all done right. You are invited, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, whoever, you are invited to participate in the comprehensive land use program. I have not seen any kind of citizens approach like that being used. I have seen it. It is routine in the federal government, I will say, and I'm not holding the federal government as an organization that does everything right, but I have seen that kind of randomization and invitation will go a long way to addressing lots of issues, disproportional, set, making things input proportional to the area, and then also making sure counties are represented properly, making
Right.
sure attitudes are represented properly.
Well, and the county does, and they've got to get out where they just advertise it on their website. I mean, they don't put it in the paper, they don't put it anywhere. It's just if you don't go to the Hall County website, you don't know anything that's going on.
Yeah. Well, I've navigated. We've all used the whole county website. I'll put things in there that I know happen that don't come back, and they don't come up in the search results.
Right.
Just that happens to all of us. So it's we always have to improve our communications and input, desire for input with the citizens, and that's just honestly just common sense. That's maintenance. Putting it out there in a jumble of web pages isn't the answer.
Right. Well, and one good thing we've seen, and Viral mentioned it last week, that Katie, since she's been in charge, she actually reads the public comments that were submitted online. If you submit a comment online against or for a development, she lets the commissioners know. Where used to, if you submitted a comment online, it was just a waste of time. So at least they're trying to make a few changes.
Yeah.
And with this we're fixing to have to get a new county manager because Zach's resigning. And the last two county managers have been hired without even a application process. They didn't even get applications. They just hired them just because they wanted to. And Zach is Jeff Stowe's nephew. I mean, it's his wife's, he got hired over a county retreat down in St. Simon's Island or Jekyll Island. They hired him over in a 1 hour discussion. I mean, and we talked about this before. I mean, we've got to have a way for several. I mean, that stuff's got to stop pretty much.
Right.
And, I think you've got a lot of good ideas, and I'm looking forward to hearing you speak tomorrow at the debate. Supposed to be raining, so hopefully people won't be on the lake, or they'll be out and we're going to get a good turnout, which we should. The paper's helping promote it. And I think it's a great idea because it's nonpartisan. You don't have any of the political parties, trying to kind of steer what the candidates say or what they do. And, what's your thoughts on the whole process of the nonpartisan? I mean, because I'm a firm believer that you have to run under a political party per se, but once you get in office, you have to represent everybody. It's not a political position. It's not a party politics position anymore.
Sure. So I think it's great Of all the jobs on the election ballot this year, the cluster of county commissioners, they seem to me to be the least partisan. If you ask me, because the kind of things that come up, as you alluded to, they're they cross cut all kinds of issues. And if someone gives me a call about topic XYZ, it's usually traffic. Some people approach me on traffic issues. That's not partisan. A lot of the issues are not partisan. If somebody has high density subdivision being proposed and right next to them, that's oftentimes not partisan. It's you just don't want it. You just don't want it. Or so these are more people. I'm happy to say that I don't sense a lot of partisanship in the county commissioner races. I don't hear the federal issues and the state issues are so very different, with the exception of probably school and where we put monies for different kinds of budget issues. There really are, they operate, in my personal view, a little bit nonpartisan, which is kind of healthy and nice from what I've seen. I like to keep it that way. I just want to make sure we're free and free of ethical conflicts.
Right. And I know one major thing with is the school board. We hadn't touched on a lot of that, but it is a major concern with residents and a part of the commission, because around 60% of your property taxes go to the school board.
Right.
And the way it's ran now, I don't know if you're familiar with it, Schofield pretty much runs the show. I mean,
right.
You go to one of their meetings, none of the other commissioners even speak for the most part. I mean, he goes through the agenda, he does everything, and they have a lot of waste over there. I mean, is there a way to build a bridge to where they communicate better and they just quit spending like drunken sailors? I mean, they just spend what they want and basically say the taxpayers are going to pay for it. Because Schofield will just flat tell you, you either pay a SPLOST or we're raising your property taxes. We're getting our money.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not a good way to go about things.
Right, right. Well, we have the power of the vote. We just need to get out there and use it. And citizens need to become more knowledgeable. Groups like Concerned Citizens of Hall County and Hall Informed, they're actually serving a vital role in getting more information out. We also see, we see the decline of newspapers across the country. I've heard a lot of negativity about the Gainesville Times. It's just, they're doing what they can with the resources that they can, and I actually think they're a pretty good paper. But information is key to shed lights on problems and win back the public trust.
Right. And I'm with you on the Gainesville Times. I don't think it's a great paper, but I support it because I pay a monthly fee to help them, because people don't understand a lot of places don't have local papers. And if we don't have a local paper, who's going to cover our local politics? I mean, who's going to get it out there? And even though they may be biased in some ways to some of the developers and the old guard, but at least it keeps the community engaged to some point.
Right, right.
But we can't expect the Atlanta Journal-Constitution to cover Hall County.
That's true.
So, anything else you want to bring out before we start wrapping things up? Viral, you got any more questions? Or
No, not really.
Well, I think we covered a good bit today. I just want you to, anything else you want to talk about, let's go ahead and bring it up, and we can, because this is your time to promote what, to give us your ideas and how you would move forward. So, and I think we're all in agreement that the change has got to come from the corruption and Kathy Cooper and all that stuff. I mean, and I think, you bring a lot to the table, and you brought it up before. you never stop learning. You've always got to keep your ears open and learn from different people, and different perspectives matter.
This has been a very thorough podcast. I've enjoyed it. The only thing I would bring up that I think we're missing in Hall County, and it doesn't take a lot of dollars to fix, is since I've opened a winery, I have learned that adults are looking for things to do. And Hall County, beyond restaurants, boating, we're not really maximizing the tourism, agritourism dollars that can come from White County or neighboring Gwinnett. Gwinnett has a population of 1.1 million people, which is larger than some states in the United States. We would love them to come spend their dollars in our county, Atlanta too, and we're not maximizing some of the key attributes of this area, which is the beauty of it all.
Right.
We have wonderful, I mean, the county is blessed with wonderful vistas and property, and and people own it, of course, but the lake is under advertised as a destination point. Is there a role for the government in that? I think there is, and I say that to kind of harshly make sure we're not using public funds to support private businesses, but we can really support agritourism. Some of the key components of this area, blueberry farms. Um, smart people can really come up with a lot of reasons to come visit the beautiful areas that Hall County has to offer. One that came to mind is a balloon race. Imagine pictures on a newspaper. Here's the Hall County balloon race. You can see the lake in the background. You can see um, all kinds of things that this place has to offer. The quaint little towns like Flowery Branch, and really start promoting this as an alternative, if you will, to some of the Dahlonega spots. And we're mired in the day to day. Hey, this zoning bothers me, and this, but we got to think past that and a little bit more toward growth too, like what we can do as a county. There are no county of festivals that I'm aware of that are supported by Hall County. You'll have the cities of Flowery Branch. They do a little festival here and there. Um, some other towns do, but there's no concentrated effort to really bring in agritourism dollars. Can I give you a firm or whatever that is? No. Can I give you examples? Maybe, but I think getting people in a room and smart people and try to figure out how we can leverage this county to become more of a tourism spot is easy, low hanging fruit.
Right.
I
Yeah, there
don't.
is a lack of it. There's not, the only major thing in the county is mule camp, and it's ran by the city.
Mhm.
There's nothing in the county anymore. They used to have the county fair years ago before you came down. It was down there at the fairgrounds that are behind the old Nichols Diner.
Mhm.
Back there, that land that's undeveloped, that was the old Hall County Fairgrounds.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
used to have the big Hall County Fair, but that went away 30 years ago,
Mhm.
35 years ago, and there's not been anything to replace it.
I know Franklin County has a rodeo.
Right.
They used to have a rodeo down in the Gainesville Civic Center, somewhere around there, or yeah. But I mean, they bring bulls in. But we need to get back to that agricultural piece of Hall County that has kind of eroded away, and people who live in small density houses in Atlanta, in Gwinnett County, we're right across the door from Gwinnett County. Again, $1.1 million. Why aren't we attracting them to come out here and see some of the beauty that what we have?
Yeah, you got Cumming over here. South County's got that many people as well. I mean, there's a lot of places we can draw from. I mean, and that's a good idea. We've got to take advantage of it. And one reason is, I think, is we have a lack of hotel space in Hall County.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not against hotels. I'm just against where Jeff Payne and all them trying to build them right now, you know. But that's a good problem to have. We've got a lot to offer, and we've got to figure out how to get it out there.
Right.
So, all right, Mark. Well, we appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and we will get this out here. I'll get this up tonight, and I'll message you when I get it online, and you're welcome to use any parts of it in your campaign or whatever. Just cut it up, whatever you need, and we wish you good luck, and we hope that worst case we can get a runoff between you and Corey, or you and some Mark. There, we know she's 100% out of it.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks, Mark.
a lot.
Take care.
You
Bye.
too.